this sort of awkward moment when you don't know when you're live or not. I think we are, guys, all live now, so fantastic. Thank you very much, guys. If you have just joined in, thank you for joining us in. If you're watching replay, we are discussing today curiosity with Dr. Chantal Thorn, and what a topic it is. How can we as a leaders, and even as a parents, you will get to it as well, be a little bit more curious? So Chantal, first and foremost, thank you very much for being so generous with your time and sharing it with me and my audience.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited. I've been watching your other podcasts and I've seen your content on LinkedIn. So I'm excited to have a conversation about this. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. I'll start with a question, and I don't think it's going to be an easy one, but an important one. And the question is, why do I need my kids to remind me that we as a human beings, we are so curious, and somehow we've forsaken it, that curiosity, when we moved into adulthood? What's going on? What's happened?
Yeah, if you have kids, you see it, right? Smack right in front of you, how they have it, how we have it very naturally. And I think, when you think about what happens, I don't know, I think there's a few things. I think the education system in many ways forces us to kind of think differently about curiosity and what matters and having the right answer versus following your natural inclination. I even think as parents, I don't know if you've had this humbling experience, but my husband and I have seen ourselves go from, oh, it's so great that they ask so many questions, to, oh my gosh, guys, come on, come on. So, or saying you're being nosy versus you're following your curiosity. And I think subtly over time, kids start to get different messages about what was joyful about curiosity. And now it starts, we call it a box of crayons. It's almost got a troublemaker curiosity connotation to it. And who wants to be a troublemaker and who wants to annoy everybody? So we slowly but surely kind of go away from something that was very natural. And I'm seeing my kids now, 7 and 10. I think they're starting to get that message. So their natural tendencies, and it's heartbreaking. You're seeing it just start to
slowly fading away.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the educational system, and sometimes we're sending these messages without wanting it really to our kids that it doesn't pay off to always be so curious, and I can suppose it's a bit of this also authority. As a parent, I've catched myself in the past, and certainly as a manager, like if you ask too many questions, like I'm gonna have to spend so much more time with explaining it. So if I say, hey, because I said so, just do it because I'm busy, it kind of like, I call it passive feedback. Through our behaviors, what we're saying, what we're doing, we're sending another message. Another message is just don't be too curious. It doesn't really pay off. I don't really like when you are. And we're just going back to not being so curious. It almost as we're replacing that, the value of being curious into the value of being opinionated almost. Absolutely. And then using that formal authority.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think we give that message in a lot of different ways in organizational settings, or we can, whether that's from the systems and processes we use to promote people. I've rarely heard somebody say, oh, I was promoted because I slow down and I ask a lot of questions. The stories we tell about what's important and what's rewarded and recognized, it's rarely curiosity really at the heart. And it is, I think, like you just said, it's being all-knowing, being opinionated, having quick answers, even if the answer has nothing to do with the root of the problem. And I think we sometimes unknowingly reinforce those things for people in our cultures and in our organizations. And it's we don't get to reap the benefits then of what curiosity has to offer.
And what curiosity does have to offer, like you're working with organizations across the globe, and I've seen your post about it, and it seems like there's an obvious answer to it. If you're curious, you know more, you explore more. But I think there is a lot more benefits to being curious as an individual and also on an organizational level.
Yeah, I think not the discrepancy, but looking at it from both of those ways, at what do I as a human, as a leader, stand to benefit from increasing my curiosity behaviors, and what does the culture, the organization that I'm here to serve, really as a leader, stand to benefit. I'm curious, of course. I'd like to hear what have you learned so far? I certainly have. I do have some thoughts and opinions on this. So I'm curious what you've been doing. A lot of this. I've been watching a lot of the work in the podcast that you're offering. What's your sense of, from a human perspective, as from the leader first, that person has the most to gain from?
Yeah, there is There's one story that really reminded me the journey that I took on. So I always have been curious when we were brainstorming. That was my strength. I could just really go into nitty-gritty details of everything, but I wasn't curious with myself as a human being. How do I feel? What do I think? How do I come across in real life? That was never a part for most of part of my life. And at some point, I started exploring self-awareness. And one of the biggest benefits that I realized that I have as by exploring curiosity is I am less judgmental of other people.
Amazing.
And so at some point, a junior manager walked up to me and she said, Raf, when you see us doing those silly mistakes, those stupid things as we've just been promoted and you've got this experience, do you judge us? Do you look at us as like, this is stupid? And I said, I no longer do. And I have to stress that no longer do. Because what I realize is that what I realize is that when people making mistakes and they behaving certain ways, we're labeling this behavior and we put it into sort of like putting it on them. And several times if you do that, all of a sudden your conscious, your biased brain thinks that person is not worth of my time. I'm busy. So if I have to coach someone, if I have to stay a little bit curious with someone or have some coaching conversation, I'll do with someone who quote unquote has potential, who showed the potential, not as someone who's my biased brain labeled she's waste of time or he's waste of time. And so what I started doing is like, if I see someone mistake, I'm saying like, that's stupid. I'm thinking, what led you to this point? Like, who was your previous manager, right? Who didn't tell you, or what was your journey, your life experience? Where you coming from that you don't see it as important, or you behaving a certain way? Because it's not bad behavior. It's just you've been influenced that way and led that way. Where does it come from? So that's the biggest benefit on my personal level of being curious is so far.
That's amazing. I hear a few themes. We at Box of Crayons, we relatively recently released a white paper where we're kind of describing seven of the key kind of organizational outcomes that can come from everyone, leaders and everyone, kind of leading with more curiosity. And a few of the things that I've just heard you describe kind of lean into this idea, what we call introspective intelligence, which is this assumption that, yes, you have something to offer. Yes, you have an intelligence and opinion, but you can't truly, really be as effective as a leader unless you slow down long enough to really deeply understand the root of what's happening. That's true intelligence. And so what you just described there, which is this quick, automatic bias of what the heck's wrong with that person, versus that slowing down and that curiosity to say, what don't I know? What was behind that? What information is not clear to me yet that will make me be even that much more successful as a leader in supporting that other person? They are more knowing than I am of their situation, their decision, their experience, right? So even in just that one example, I'm hearing themes of that. I'm hearing, we call it meaningful connections, which is really the more I can demonstrate the truest stuff, curiosity that I care, and I am willing to slow down long enough to better understand where you were coming from, what led to that decision, builds a trust, right? And an ability to kind of maybe say the difficult things when they really do need to be said, that I might not ever really say to you if all I ever get from you is, well, that was ridiculous and here's what you should have done. So even in your one example, I'm hearing 2 or 3 of the various kind of organizational outcomes that the evidence is very strong that this is what you could be having as a human leader and as an organizational context. And yet it's not always that easy to put into practice. Yeah.
So now I'm curious, what's the biggest benefit of really exploring curiosity with such intensity and making it your professional work?
Yeah, it's my background has always been in organizational consulting, learning and development, program development, coaching, that kind of that field. But it was probably, how old was Aiden? Aiden is my now 10-year-old. But it was when he was a late toddler age that he was he wanted to learn how to swim. He had told us he wanted to learn how to swim, and he
Mm-hmm.
loved swimming. You know, oh, I want to learn how to swim. I think this is great. So my husband and I, great. We're going to bring him to the community pool. He's going to learn how to swim. He's going to be, you know, thrilled with this performance, this new skill that he wants to attain. And we get there day one, and it is screaming and crying and resistance, and he's not going in.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband and I are so confused. We're like, well, what is happening? This is all he's ever wanted. He's wanted to do this since for as long as we can remember, right? And we both go into advice mode. And we don't really care about him at all, honestly, in the sense of what is underlying it. We're like, okay, just put on the water wings. What can we do? We just remind him that you've always wanted this.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, you've always wanted this skill. Hurry up, just go in there. Which, of course, as you can imagine, was not successful at all. And when we slowed down, and I was putting him to bed one night, and I was like, Aiden, what's happening? You know, I was just, rather than I got to fix this, I have to know the answer. What is wrong? This doesn't make any sense. I got super, super curious with him and just asked him to help me understand what would make him feel braver, what would make him be willing to do this. And he was able to describe some things that were really easy, and that we were able to go in the next day and you know, he was able to kind of get where he needed to get to achieve this goal that he had. Mm-hmm. And it just smacked me in the face very quickly that, wow, I'm leading incorrectly. You know, mm-hmm. Not only just my children, but in my business, and in the way that, you know, I'm supporting and frankly, even the assumption of what I think my role is as a leader.
Yeah.
And it was easily transferable, that if I approached all situations in the same way as I did with Aiden the second time, mm-hmm. curiosity, slowing down, getting clear, remaining, almost absolving myself of the assumption that I knew what the answer was, because frankly, it was obvious once he told us that we really didn't. We were very wrong, brainstorming all these ideas that made no sense. And I was hooked. I was just like, okay, this is what I should be doing in my own leadership and in my support of others. How do we slow that? Oh my gosh, there's something to solve. There's something to solve. Hurry up. Mm-hmm. What is it? How do I slow that automatic response down? And how do I care enough? This is my son. I don't care about anybody anymore. And yet I was quick to move forward. So how do I demonstrate my caring and my respect for that person's experience, not mine and my assumption about what this actually is, in mm-hmm. order to really help that person perform, upskill, engage, be the version of themselves that they really want to be. So
mm-hmm. It's a very good question. How do we do that now? On my personal level, and I share that with you, and I'm curious to hear what your experience is and how you advise. But what I did is, for some reason, I had this curiosity in one set of scenarios, not in the other one. And I thought, okay, so if I can do it there, why can't I do it here? And I just turned up a little bit my competitive side, which is, well, if I'm able to do it there, what do I need to do it here? What are the steps? How do I actually go to the root cause of that? And that's and I use the same process of being curious elsewhere. I'm, you know, brainstorming different ideas with myself, like, what's my language look like? What's my storytelling look like? And I started really breaking it down and listening to myself. And I'm like, oh, I've just killed my own curiosity. Oh, that's being judgmental, that sort of thing. So that's what I've done. But what would you advise, like, for all those managers that step into this leadership role and think, right, I've heard that curiosity is really important, and back me up on that, because I've read some report that in the next 5 years, curiosity will be one of the most important, you know, trait that we can have as leaders, which made me excited, but at the same time I was like, so where's the leadership? Where is the EQ? But I'm diversing now. So how do I as a leader really turn into this curiosity and use it as my tool and infuse it into my leadership paradigm?
Yeah, I love what you just said, because frankly, it's interesting. We were having a meeting the other day, just talking a little bit about one of our programs at Box of Crayons, and we were saying how, you know, it naturally fits, and so many of the clients we work with are looking at their leaders and the leadership and how they can leverage curiosity and everything we've been talking about. And these skills can be leveraged for anybody, individual contributors alike, particularly for the purpose of self-reflection. So I love that you just said that, because I think that is one of the first keys, to almost coach yourself, to stay curious with yourself, to not berate yourself if, you know, things aren't kind of going the way that you wanted them to go. And married with that, I think, is a very vulnerable and honest reflection with yourself on what you think your job is as a leader. I think it's easier for me to be open to slowing down, to not having the answer, to leading with questions and curiosity, if my belief and my assumption is that my job is genuinely to grow and build and encourage others. It's harder for me to buy into the concept of not having all the answers and slowing down and asking better questions if my assumption is, and I would consider it to be a little bit more older school, but if my assumption was that my job is to have all the answers as a leader, how am I going to mentally reconcile that belief that, frankly, that's why I was promoted and that is my job, with somebody saying, well, slow down, and everybody else has good answers too, right? So having a bit of a really genuine and honest, what do I actually think my role is here in leadership, is maybe be a mindset shift of, okay, if my role really is to grow and support others, then why am I always answering the questions? And I love what you said about moments as well. I think that's really critical. I'm very aware my likelihood to go into advice monster mode is increasingly higher when I've had prolonged periods of kind of lack of confidence, or I'm feeling vulnerable for some reason. And I've noticed that I tend to do it more with newer people, where I'm like, I don't know, do I have to prove myself here? Do I have, So having that really self-reflective moment too, of doing a bit of an audit. Where am I more likely to jump to advice, to jump to answers, to feel that anxiety of prove that you know something, prove you have the answers, or let's get this done faster. Let me see if I can just tell everybody what to do. Because if you can see patterns of, oh, it's interesting, it's always with that person, or, oh, it's interesting, it's always in this context, then you can prime yourself to be more ready and more aware when you go into those situations. So I think I love that self-reflective, be curious with yourself, coach yourself first in order to see where your mindset is at before you start doing the mechanics of, okay, I'm going to ask better questions, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
What you just described prompts sort of a question in my mind. Kind of I've reflected a little bit on it, and to me, it's like when you've mentioned when you behave differently with somebody who's newer to your team. It seems like I need to prove that I'm a credible person. Versus the curiosity builds the trust,
right?
And we believe that it's more important to be credible than build that trust with individuals. So I think flipping the script and understand, like, and you need to build that trust. People need to buy into you. You have to earn that right to be sort of followed, rather than just being credible. I know all the answers, because, quite frankly, what you're doing by dishing out those answers, you're diminishing other people's status, which is hugely important to us. You're saying, I'm smarter than you. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm blowing off your candle to make my shine brighter. And then, I get it, Chantal. Your intention is great. My intention is great. My intention is to help. What I'm doing without unintentionally is literally I'm saying to you, I'm smarter than you in here. Here's what we have to do. And we need to slow down and change that script, I believe. I need to build that trust.
Build it. Right? Yeah, and that's what curiosity does, right? Like you're saying, that's it. So if I could, slow down long enough to, in those moments, to not, like, that very thing that I'm yearning for in that moment where my advice monster kicks in is actually more quickly and more readily achievable via curiosity than via what I do in that moment, right? So, I think it's a great recognition that it brings up the idea too of, what am I trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? It goes back to even what I said about that mindset. What do you think your role is as a leader? What are you trying to achieve? And 9 times out of 10, the research is very clear that your faster route there is going to be curiosity and better questions and slowing down. And so the more I can be aware and have that mindset and awareness of that, the better equipped I am in the moments where I know, for me, for somebody else, it might be something different. That, that might not be the thing at all. It might just be speed. It's not so much that I feel like I need to know something. It's just, I want to get this done, right? So knowing yourself and understanding the things that make it more difficult for you, I think is a helpful start.
Yeah. What will help me personally is the need and desire to help myself and tune in curiosity. So I choose curiosity to be my second core value, although I'm not there yet to the level that some people are. but I choose to deliberately in order to improve myself, my own emotional self-awareness. And if I can share, guys, one thing with you and with you, Chantal, is what helped me is practicing that curiosity is to reading things on social media. And I know it's a rabbit hole, and I know I don't watch much news, or I'm trying to avoid, but every now and then I just go there, and I know that conversation will be heated, just to test myself, that my curiosity, that initial response. Am I going to slow down, or am I going to judge? Am I going to become that keyboard warrior and reply straight away, or I can slow down? Because I much rather do it in that scenario than in real life with my kids, with my employees, and people that I care the most about. So finding your moments where you can practice that curiosity, and you don't have to prove to anything to anyone right now in the heat conversation. Because you know, as soon as we having conversation with human beings, emotions entering in, and things are slightly different, more challenging. So I've seen somewhere in one of your posts about developing the curiosity habit, and I think that's the key. Finding moments and places where you can practice that curiosity habit, and then you can bring it into the workplace, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's it. It's again, it's individualized. I mean, I guess if there's a theme here, it's what works for you might not work for me. So being able to stay super curious, if I understand that my role as a leader is not to have all the answers, and I believe that, and I understand that creating this kind of a habit and really leveraging the benefits of curiosity, it's not a you know, a quarterly meeting. If I really understand and believe that this is a way of being with each other, then I can look for moments every single minute. It's not an exaggeration. Every single minute of my day, there's an opportunity to practice these skills. And it's up to me, as you just said for yourself, it's up to me to say, given what I know about myself, given what I know about my own leadership, my own time, how busy I am, where I spend most of my day, you know, where am I most likely to have great opportunities to practice? And I love that. I mean, social media is definitely a good opportunity to kind of like, do I want to slow down? Do I want to pipe in there? And like I said, maybe certain meetings that you tend to feel, you know that you want to do the exact opposite. Maybe it is with your kids. I don't know. You get to choose where the safest place is to say, okay, I want to practice this more. I want to build a better habit. I want to take one space, one question that I want to use instead, and kind of see how this works in my day-to-day. I'm going to stay really curious with myself when I mess up. It's a really important part of building a new habit. I mean, the irony is probably not lost on all of us that the most important thing is when you screw up, because you will, advice will kick in, you'll say the wrong thing, you'll tell somebody they should do something before even understanding what the heck the problem was. When that happens, as you're practicing, you might mess up, Raf, when you think, oh, I can't stop myself. That's a good one. I got to get in there. And then you got to just go, okay, that's interesting. I had said I was going to slow down and be more curious and lead with questions, and I didn't. That's cool. I wonder why that is. What can I notice about why that might have been? You know, oh, I was tired, or like, again, for me, it was with somebody new. Oh, gosh, there it is again. I always, you know, so finding those places that make sense for you, given what you know about yourself as a leader, and remembering that when you pick a small thing to do, whether it's just to slow down before you respond, or whether it's the only way I'm going to respond is with a question, being super curious and gentle with yourself when it goes off the rails is really critical. That's a learning culture. It's a growth mindset in and of itself, right? So how do I respond when I mess up while I'm practicing is equal parts as critical as where am I practicing and what will I be practicing for habit building.
This is great. This is brilliant. I love it. You've mentioned that potentially one of the ways of developing curiosity would be only responding with a question. So let's just let's just slow down here a little bit more for longer and spend some time around the questioning. What are your favorite questions? Because, and I'll go into in a minute, I've learned from David Marquet that there's a small tweaks that we can do with the questions, and then the impact, the emotional involvement, it just goes from north to south, literally, just by changing one word or switching it around. So what are your favorite questions, and how do you approach your questions?
Yeah, so I mean, naturally, I love our 7 essential questions that our founder, Michael, I mean, and I do. So
Well,
some of
they are fine-tuned. I have to say,
right.
it's hard to compete with that.
You can't
it's hard
go
to compete with that.
The best question in the and what else is about as simple a question as you can have, but the data that gives you, if you are quick enough to slow down. So for example, if I was your formal leader and you came to me and said, "Oh, this thing is frustrating me," and rather than going like, "Oh gosh, I totally get that. That happened to me last year. Here's what have you tried X?" To just slow down and say, "Huh, yeah, that does sound frustrating. What else, Raf?" Like the gold that question alone can bring up, and I've seen it happen many, many times, is what we're searching for. That's the purpose of my leadership. That's the purpose of your leadership, to get clearer, to help that person understand that they have their own story, their own version, their own experience, and that I respect you enough to ask you those really cool questions. So, if I have to say yes, if I say yes to this, what do I have to say no to? Like these 7 essential questions that are part of our programming and Michael's leadership, they're no-brainers. They work, and there's a reason why they work. Personally, some other questions that I do tend to use often are, and this is a bit of a strange one, I know, but when somebody is feeling frustrated, or I used to use this a lot in my women's coaching or leadership coaching off the side. If somebody's kind of like, you can tell that they can't kind of come up with a thing that they're wanting to say. I don't know. They'll say, "I don't know a lot." I will sometimes say,
"That's my son. That's my youngest
son." Is that your son?
The default response, "I don't know." And I'm like, that's not growth mindset, boy.
That's not a response. I don't know if this would work with children so much. I have seen it be successful with adults. I hear you. I hear you saying you don't know. Just play with me here for a little bit. If you did know, what would the answer be? And it feels frustrating for sometimes. Sometimes people will say like, "I just told you I didn't know." But what sometimes happens is if you stay curious long enough and kind of keep asking that type of question, it may be because that person doesn't feel safe enough yet, or it hasn't bubbled up for them enough yet. And it's not so much that they don't know. It's just that we haven't continued to offer a slow, safe space for that thing to come up. So I like sometimes pushing with that question. I love what hasn't been said yet that needs to be said. We all are always holding on to something behind the scenes that we think, "Oh, is it safe for me to say that? It's really important, but I don't know if I can." So when somebody just gives permission and says what still hasn't been said yet, I think it can be really, really powerful. So I would often end, calls or opportunities with, if somebody had come to me with something, I really like that question too, for what it can.
I'll make note about that one, because
permission. It gives you permission. Just to say maybe the scary things.
It does. Like, just to quickly back to that I don't know part, and when I'm watching my son doing it, you've mentioned that they're not feeling safe enough. That's one of the reasons. But another one, from my belief, is that it becomes a default answer. It's a shortcut to just kind of like get away from this conversation.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Hold on, I've got some echo, and I don't want to have echo. Oh, okay. Hopefully. Yeah, sorry. I'll just. Sorry, guys. I just need to tune it down, because if it stays like that, then the rest of the episode will be with the echo. And I don't know why it came up. Okay. Hopefully it will be solved.
Yes.
Could you just check if your headset is plugged in, maybe?
Yeah, it seems good.
Okay. Hopefully it will stop. Sorry for disruption. It's just, I know, just the whole episode will be impacted by that.
Yeah, of course.
For me, I've learned from my son is that it just becomes that habit of getting away with the conversation. Is just easy and simple answer. And if you let me go, we're done here, right? We don't have to work harder for the rest of the conversation. And what you're doing with your question, and that acknowledging that part that you're saying you don't know, but what if you did know the answer? What would that be? It's just basically forcing that person. And I can see why some people can get annoyed, because
they certainly do. They have, for sure. Yeah.
Very few people actually do that, but it helps going behind that habit of saying, "Hey, I don't know," and the conversation is ended on my end, right?
Yeah.
So all
you
of
can
that.
Imagine when you're like, if you're in a leadership position and and maybe especially if you haven't built up enough trust or relationship with somebody yet. And I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Like your tone, your intention behind a question. I think most people have really good, BS meters. They know if you're just kind of like, oh gosh, Chantal went to some leadership session and now she's throwing these questions at me, versus she means that question and she gets it. So I think there's there's a way, if somebody had come to me with a problem in a leadership context and I was just kind of like, oh okay, fine, Raf. But if you did know the answer, what would it be? With frustration, with lack of slowing down, versus me slowing down, even in my approach to how I physically say the question and say, like, I'm still curious, Raf. I hear you. I know you're saying you don't know, and yet I'm still feeling curious. So like, this might seem really weird, but let me approach it this way. If you did have the answer, if you did know what was underlying this really frustrating thing that you just talked to me about, like, what do you think it could be? Is different than, okay, Raf, I know, but if you did have the answer, like, could you just, like, I got another meeting, 5 minutes from now. So your curiosity at its nature, the intention is true. And that person will know if it's not, right? Yeah. So the intention behind really actually caring enough to provide that space will be felt. And so that's another thing for all of us when we're practicing is, am I just rushing through this and trying to say it because somebody said curiosity is important? Or do I actually care to give Raf another few minutes to see what else might bubble up?
Intention. It's the perception. It's the perception of intention aligned. The intention and perception is really aligned. Super important. One thing that I work right now with my questions is start asking questions like, how sure are you versus are you sure? Stop asking those binary questions. And again, I've learned it from David Market. And it's so damn hard because the habit of saying, are you okay? Or are you sure? Versus, how sure are you? I'm like, I need to work on that because it opens a completely different conversations just by tweaking this one simple word within the question. So I was curious to hear.
I love those kinds of, the more I can keep it open. That's the fundamental premise behind all of it, right? Is if I want to have better, more engaged employees, if I want to innovate faster, if that's of importance to me, if I want to actually solve the right problems versus the first thing that comes, opening up the question in that way, it immediately forces more data to be brought to the table, which is always a better way of addressing, the problem, and forces us as leaders to slow down and at least put to the side for a short period of time the bias, the assumption, the, oh man, I've been there, the, oh, I got an idea. And it just forces it to go away for a brief moment. It might pop up and there might still be a space for it, and that's fine. But in that very moment, those open-ended questions, those broader questions, forces the other person to do a little bit more of the work, and beautifully allows for more of the real stuff to kind of emerge, right? So I love those, and that's just it. That's what our 7 essential questions are really fundamentally about too. It's open. You are the owner of your experience. I truly care enough about what that is to slow down and ask these questions of you.
Yes. So we spoke about the work that we have to do with ourselves as individuals, as managers. And what I know also from my experience, and I've learned from some who really did a great job with creating an environment through processes. You've actually mentioned at the beginning, the processes as well. So if Box of Crayons starts working with some organizations or teams or managers, what are the processes that you're looking at, and where do you focus, and where are you suggesting that the changes? Where do you see the processes being the one that impeding that curiosity and the one that opening this curiosity? Because I'm guessing this is like a kind of one which is opening up, because there's so many different moments and points when we can change things around to either impede that curiosity or open up and allow for it to thrive. So let's talk about processes and how Box of Crayons solves that, how do you solve that?
We're really lucky that we work with clients who are really looking for that enterprise-wide change. Like that's who we work with. We've got clients who are bought in already to this idea that curiosity really does allow for all of these fabulous organizational outcomes that, again, 9 times out of 10 you're working on anyways. And so our clients are also working with us. It really is a partnership, to say, yeah, where do we use this? Where can we leverage this? What do we do before, during, and after our experience with you, Box of Crayons, in order to really make this kind of come to life in our companies, even after the fact, right? So a lot of our, I think, if we think of this as a way of being and not a meeting or a, one process, you see a lot of our clients looking at the talent management, like end-to-end experience, and really staying curious about every stage, from what do our job descriptions say, our talent acquisition processes, to our onboarding processes, like the entire gamut of your experience with us as a company, to what do we reward, what stories do we tell, how do we promote people, what values do we have, or leadership competencies. Is there anything in there about questions and curiosity and slowing down, or is it frankly the opposite? Do we say we care about this, but like you're suggesting, our processes, or what we talk about, or what we support, or what we encourage actually is the opposite? So you can see a lot of our clients when they're working with our sales team in particular, kind of setting up for this transformation that they're looking for. You can see the wheels turning along our entire journey of an employee here in our company. Where could we stay curious about implementing or looking at, that's not curiosity driven. We're actually rewarding the exact opposite. Maybe we should think about that, right? So yeah, really looking at your entire life cycle of an employee's experience with you, and staying really curious about, does that get closer to the goal of curiosity or farther away? Can really help an organization and a client really think about, where are moments, and there are multiple, where are some of the moments where we can further implement these concepts within our day-to-day, because that's what it is. It's a day-to-day implementation, rather than a one-off or a kind of quarterly, let's talk about curiosity this quarter. So what have you seen? What have you seen in some of your leadership or other people that you've been speaking of what are some of the processes or spaces where people are being more curious about implementing more curiosity?
I'll be sharing my experiences when I was working as a manager in different organizations, because I've seen it when you spoke about the whole process from onboarding your employees all the way to promotion. One thing that popped to my mind straight away is, how do we go through the process of interviews? Is it literally a scripted questions and all the same questions that everyone else asks? Literally, if you just go to the Google and you say top 10 questions on an interview, and you go there and it's the same questions being asked, like I mentioned, I call it a passive feedback. You're sending that message that we're not really that curious, we're not really that different, we're not asking questions differently here. The ratio between the questions, like how much, who does the talking, but who is asking the questions? Am I allowing you to answer the questions? And if you did ask me the question in the interview process, what sort of answers I'm giving to you? And that kind of already primes you.
Sure does.
Whether who we are as an individuals. Another example, I've seen different types of team meetings or pre-shift meetings or team briefs in different brands, and having different names to it. Like, I'm from hospitality, and we call it team meetings or team briefs. And so how do you lead them? Again, shows whether you are curious or not. Are you going through the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, off you go? Or you're starting with asking that questions, and you let your team talk, and then you just wrap it up at the end, right? So to me, those are the moments when you can look at yourself as a manager, like, am I really leading with that curiosity? My process allows for it. Or am I saying curiosity here is important? And here's another lesson that I've learned. We have this habit when you come up with an idea to the manager and somebody says, yeah, I know. So like, it's not even necessarily only about the ideas, but in hospitality, a lot of things are just breaking down, for instance. And somebody comes to you as, right, there's a pipe that was cracked there. And even if I do know about it, I practice not to responding with, yes, I know. Because what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm smarter than you. There's no point of raising anything with me because I'm ahead of the game. I'm not. So it took a little bit of practice in putting that ego aside. But even how you respond to those questions when people bringing to you, even if you heard about it, just don't respond with, yes, I know. Because literally you're killing the curiosity there. You're saying next time, just don't bring it. Because again, I'll make you look silly because I already know. who's the smartest guy in here, me or you? I'm ahead of you, right?
Yeah.
So for me, those kind of small things, and I like to look at from operational perspective, and this is a bit more like how we respond. Does it actually allow for that curiosity? Are you the leader who speaks first or last in the meeting? Again, those kind of small things. And I have Kieran here engaging those comments. And the things that I learned the most about curiosity and the processes is from Kieran himself, how he led the businesses from onboarding and job description. You also mentioned job description.
Yeah.
Again, same thing.
Every moment is a moment to either say, we do actually care about this, or we just say we care about this, and humans are very attuned to that cognitive dissonance. Wait a minute, we're embarking with box of crayons on this enterprise-wide change, unleashing curiosity and really reaping the benefits. So we say that, but then if all like you're just describing, if all of those micro moments within and all your processes within scream the opposite, that cognitive dissonance is draining and frankly gets you the exact opposite of the things that you're trying to achieve, right? So I love that idea of just really looking at each moment, each process, each situation, and being very humbly curious with yourself to say, is there too much space here between what we're saying we care about and want more of and what we actually do on a day-to-day basis? We call it change maker curiosity. There's that troublemaker curiosity, which kind of, the one that killed the cat, like you just described. And then there's change maker curiosity, the kind of curiosity that gets you the benefits. And if you're saying one thing and doing another, you don't reap the benefits. So it's a really humble, curious investigation into all the micro moments in your day-to-day and whether or not they're getting you closer to or farther away from the benefits of participating in this type of programming with us.
So we've got change maker and we've got troublemaker. Are there any other types of curiosity?
These are the main types of curiosity that we are focusing on right now. We do have some things up our sleeve coming down the road for different types of curiosity. There certainly are others, and there are a lot of researchers and experts and thought leaders in the field looking at empathic curiosity and looking at a kind of a failure focused type of curiosity. There's some things that are really keeping us curious, a box of crayons that we're looking at investigating down the road. For us right now, our biggest programming is really looking at that change maker curiosity, that coach-like curiosity for us right now, which tells us to slow down, to be coach-like, to quiet your advice monster long enough to at least get to the root of what's happening, and to pull that from the people that you're engaging and to get the best out of. I mean, I think you hire these people and they're so excited and they think, oh, I have so much to give and so much to offer. And then what happens if they come into your team and we don't actually actively pull that from people? We don't make space for it. So right now we're really looking at that coach-like curiosity with our programming and really helping organizations to reap the benefits from it.
Sure. So maybe a little bit, there's a question here from Sebastian, and so let's just stay a little bit of that coach-like curiosity. Sebastian says he tends to really ruminating on the message that he needs to deliver. I'm guessing it's about feedback as well. And he says that, I guess my main worry is I'm trying to get the message received well. How do I overcome that overthinking? So I'm guessing there's a type of curiosity that can either ruminate you and can really go into that rabbit hole and not feeling confident with yourself, rather than, wow, I'll stay curious with the questions and I come to conclusion that it's worthwhile. There is such a value with me delivering it, and I'm not going to worry as much about how they respond to it, but focus on something else. Are we getting into something here? Is it a part of that what you're doing?
Yeah, I love that. And Sebastian, I think I can relate. I can relate. I think, and I'm not sure if that's the same for you. For me, it's often about relationship and trust and valuing people and going, I want to share something and I don't want to hurt anyone. And like you just said, and I believe it's my experience. This is my version. It's my experience. I feel like it's important enough because I care about you that much that I want to share it. Right. So it's interesting because, coach-like curiosity is really about allowing for there to be space for other, for that, whoever Sebastian, that person might be that you're talking about, for them to have space to bring forward something. So I still think, you can, and for what it's worth, I would be one to mostly just name that as it is. It depends on your relationship with somebody, but it wouldn't be unusual for me to say, hey, Raf, I'm nervous. I'm a little nervous because I have something to share that I do worry might hurt you if it's that level, or might upset you, or might throw you off. And yet, because I care about us and our working relationship so much, I'm hopeful that you're open to me sharing it. Are you okay with us having that conversation right now? So it's in my nature to just call that out and say, I'm feeling a bit nervous. I've been worrying about this because I care so much about how we work together. And I want you to hear my good intention. Like Sebastian, I don't know if that fits for you, if that's in your style or in your nature, but it would be in mine to just call that out and kind of reduce some of the power cognitively that it's holding in my space, in my head, or in my my mental space. Your feedback, Sebastian, is yours. It's your experience. No problem in sharing. A coach-like approach would definitely say, after you share it, to say, how's that landing, for you, Raf? Or what was your experience of that moment that I just talked about? Or tell me where you're coming from. Like, there has to be that space of, that's your perspective. What's Raf's? What's that other person's, right? So we don't talk a lot about feedback in our coach-like approach right now, because it's not what we currently mean by coach-like curiosity.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think there's a way to provide feedback that respects that you can stay curious about the other person and their experience, and remember that yours is yours, and that's okay too. It's not truth. It's your perspective. Yeah.
There are a few
I know
things
you talk about this a lot, Raf. I've seen, There
are a few things that I really like what you just said. And I think we all have those thoughts, that I'm doing it because I respect you, I care about you, but it feels uncomfortable to share it. And I think what we often do, if we do share something as a managers, we are bringing it into that realm of being professional. I'm saying as a manager versus, hey, I care about you as Raf, I care about you as Chantal. So my advice to you, Sebastian, also would be, share it as you. I'm worried, I'm caring about you, and take that language away of being a manager, of being an employee, and that impacts, like your behavior impacts the business. If you have to mention it, absolutely, but keep it at the end, my advice would be, and just bring it to that human level. I care about you, and I'm worried that this will happen if we don't. And you just acknowledging that you're feeling also nervous about it. I love it. But there's also one thing that you've mentioned that is super important, and that is, do it if that's your style, do it. If not, don't. And I think this is such a great reminder to everyone, because one of my biggest pet peeves is when I see managers, or when I Google how to provide feedback, how to share feedback, there's like a script over there, and it's just like, do it that way. And I'm like, if I do it that way, then my employees will have Raf, and then Raf the manager, and then Raf the manager who provides the feedback. It's just like, you never hear me saying things like that. Right. And I always use example, because it's a really good one for me on a personal level, is you'll never hear me rephrasing it. You never hear me finishing the conversation or asking, like, what I'm hearing you saying is, right? Because it doesn't resonate with me very well. That doesn't mean that sentence isn't right. Because when I heard Claude Silver using it with me, I was like, it's part of her, who she is. And it felt so natural and comfortable that it actually was so impactful. Something that I wouldn't ever say because it's not comfortable with me, all of a sudden had such an impact. I was blown away. And I was like, it's not that the sentence is wrong. It's who you're saying, and is it aligned with who you are? Are you saying with a conviction and being comfortable with it? And I was like, you need to remember that, because it's such a great experience. If it doesn't work for you, this isn't who you are, don't use it. Because what you'll do is you confuse your people. They will be like, well, what's your intention? Are you with me? Are you with me? Am I talking to the manager, to Sebastian, to Raf? You want to take that away. So figure it out and work on being authentic and align it within your language.
Oh, I love that. And so not only do you offer your people like two separate versions of yourself, which is confusing, you're also expending energy that you probably don't have right now or ever, frankly. To be misaligned in your leadership, you're wanting to lead your team with curiosity, which for some of us is already, because of the advice monster and all these other things, is already challenging enough. To add a layer of inauthenticity that sucks energy out of you, like, oh gosh, I have to say it this way, and I have to do, like, who has time for that right now? So I love that idea of really figuring out how it works for you. And Sebastian and others should certainly really kind of be curious with yourself, self-reflective about, does this feel right for me? What is most important for me? Why am I ruminating about this? What's the most important thing here for me that's making me ruminate? And if you can get clearer on that, Sebastian, why am I ruminating? What am I worrying about? If it feels comfortable, at least claiming it for yourself. You know, the neuropsych will say that's going to reduce some of the impact of it. If you just say like, oh gosh, I keep ruminating about this because I'm worried I'm going to hurt Raf's feelings. That already will reduce some of the strain. And like we just said, if you're also comfortable saying that out loud to that person too, great. You know, only if it kind of feels right. So this is that you're leading with curiosity, you're leading your team, but you're leading yourself with curiosity as well. Staying calm, asking yourself lots of questions. Why is this important to me? Why am I thinking about this? Does this feel right for me? Is this who I am? You know, it's
how much time I'm spending on the positive side of it or negative side of it. Again, super important.
And am I being clear that this is my experience and that I want to hear and be curious about your experience as well? Yeah,
absolutely. You've mentioned different types of curiosity, and as I was preparing for this episode, I did a little bit of introspection, kind of like my life journey with curiosity. And I concluded, and correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe it's something that you also discovered, is that I am selectively curious. Just like with a growth mindset, you can be growth mindset in one area and another one not so much. So like when it comes to singing, I'm not growth mindset whatsoever. Like I always say, I'm through and through growth mindset. I've discovered it at early age and I made it my tool. Like I always want to be the David facing down the Goliath. When it comes to singing, I'm a fixed mindset person, right?
I love it.
But what I realized with curiosity is that I'm selectively curious. I already mentioned that my strength is within brainstorming sessions.
Right.
Then I double down on self-awareness and I become really curious with myself, how I coming across, how I feel. And those are two sides that are my strength. And then I discovered My Best Question by Michael Bungensteiner. And I realized that he can see a random object hidden behind the fence. He looks at it, marvels at it, and comes up with a life-changing story and question. And I'm like, this is a completely different type of curiosity. And if I choose to curiosity to be my second core value, where do I stand in that sort of like how curious I am versus him? And so for a while I felt bad, like I'm not actually curious if I compare myself to him. But then what I realized, no, it seems like there are different types of curiosity, and my strength is elsewhere than Michael or someone else. Is this something that you've experienced, noticed, or am I alone in that world?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think you're bang on. I think not only because of the impact it has on you, like we talked a little bit about before. So leaders who are really thinking about this should be self-reflective of, oh, interesting, it's more comfortable for me in this situation than in another. And even more kind of holistically, like you said, looking at bigger picture things that, oh, I'm drawn and more natural or more comfortable being curious in this kind of a context than in others. I think what's most important to you? What are you trying to achieve? Does it matter that you're not curious in that situation versus this, right? Like the answer is whether or not that matters, or that a leader has to push themselves to go, gosh, I've noticed that I'm more comfortable and curious in this environment, but not in this one. I don't know if it matters. You won't know, Raf, if it matters. Does it matter to that person, and why? And what are you losing if you don't try to push yourself to be more curious in that venue or not? There are lots of places in my life that I don't feel like I have the energy, especially these days, nor the interest to be curious about, in the sense of learning new skills, maybe. So, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to spend my time there. I am trying to be more curious in terms of my relationships with everybody. So I have a natural, that's then quieting that advice monster and all these other things that we've been talking about. So I think it's normal for us to be pulled and drawn and to have certain areas where we will or won't. And for us to really, again, kind of question ourselves about, does that matter? And organizations who might be doing this work too. Okay, oh gosh, our culture seems to naturally support this idea here, but not here. Does that matter? I'm not sure. What are you trying to achieve? What's your goal? Yeah. What matters most right now? What kind of energy do you have? How many resources do you have available to you? So I think we're all individually and as leaders, and as especially now as organizational cultures, having to maybe be okay with limiting the scope with which we want to build these muscles and these new habits for ourselves. How do you feel about the fact that that's not an area maybe that you're naturally drawn to? Does it bother you? Do you think
it did in the past? Because it did in the past because I want to compete with everyone.
Right.
It's just my attitude, like nature. I've got this. There is this nature within me that I need to sort of compete. And over the years, I've learned, especially recently, that I'm competing with people not to win anymore, and that's really important. In respect of that curiosity itself, it mattered to me because I wanted to be super curious with everyone, and I was like, why am I not so curious as he is? Like, how does it do that? But then I realized, do I really need to marvel on things on the street to be so curious, or is it better for me to still now, for next few years, and that's another point, for next few years, just be curious with myself.
Yeah, I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
As almost exactly. I'm 38. Yeah. Do I really have to have everything figured out? No, I don't. So maybe that's something that I'll be doing in 5 years' time. But now, what's important is still focus on curiosity, but still with my own feelings, my emotions, my thoughts, and being present. And if I do that for the next year or two, not for the week or two, not for 2-3 months, play the long game.
Yep.
I believe maybe that then the curiosity will naturally start to seep out, and you'll start picking up things around you more subconsciously and then consciously, without even wanting it to happen. I'm guessing that's the journey of Michael with curiosity. Right? He mentioned to me when he was like in university, he was very curious already. So we're talking about, I don't know, 20, 30 years or so. So we don't have to compete with Michael, and it no longer bothers me. No longer bothers me.
Awesome.
But you know what? It took some time for me to realize, because if I wasn't, again, curious with what's going on, why am I not like him, then it would bother me. And I was like, there's no even point to using curiosity as my second core value, or even shout about it. And I'm open about it, because then someone can tell me,
not
you don't seem that curious like everyone else. And so why are you saying curiosity is your second core value? Because I'm curious in my mind without my own emotions, could be the answer, right?
Yeah. And we know that that's going to help. If this is something that is really of value to you, to a leader, to a company, then hankering down, narrowing. I mean, especially with habit change and behavior change, we know it's not going to be helpful to say, okay, company X, we're going to be more curious in these 17 ways over these, and each of those 17 have 15 processes underneath them. And it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming at the best of times, let alone again during these times. So organizations and leaders, individuals who can hyper focus and narrow down the one or two things that they think is doable and most meaningful given their goals, their priorities, organizational or leadership outcomes that person or that company is trying to achieve, it is a more fruitful and beneficial way to look at even enterprise-wide change, let alone individual or leadership change. So it's we don't need the cognitive overload right now, and we don't need to be all things to all people.
Absolutely.
We need to think about what we're trying to achieve in our companies and in our leadership, and focus.
So we're about to wrap up. And before I ask the last question that I always keep asking my guests, there is one thing that I want to ask you now, because we spoke about your favorite question and certain ways, and you just mentioned that rather than just focusing on 7 different things, focus on one thing. So what would you advise to a manager who wants to finish every meeting with a question? So let's just say, you know what, I want to bring curiosity to my company, and we're going to do it by doing just the one thing and one thing only. And that's going to be asking one question at the end of the meeting. What would that question be, or what sort of the guidance would be here?
Yeah, I like that. Again, hyper focus, one thing. I think at the risk of sounding repetitive, what is that manager trying to achieve with that question? Is it to get more diverse voices from the team?
I would say I want to start showing that curiosity matters here. And because I don't know where to start, I don't want to start on 17 different things.
Right.
That's the one thing that I can implement in every meeting, regardless of what we're discussing. But what I want to do is, so I'm trying to imagine myself, if I'm going back to my business, and like, okay, I want to introduce curiosity to my team. I don't want to do it in 7 different places. I want to do it by asking one question at the end of my meetings to show that questions are important. And we ask them, and they are really good questions, provocative, like getting us into a sort of like really thinking mode and expressing ourselves. What would that question be? Or what's your advice here? Maybe I'm trying to do something that's not doable.
Oh, I think it's great. I think I'm always a bit of that's the very nature of the curiosity and our, like, get clear before you offer any. So you're watching me do it in real time. So I think, given what you just said, like a few of the ones we've already touched on might be helpful. And I know you've heard this one before with Michael. Something as simple and yet powerful as, what's been most useful for you guys here today? If we had a team meeting or we had we hashed something out. to give everybody 2 seconds to just go, yeah, what was that about? What am I taking away from that? It can be a really powerful growth mindset, learning, self-reflective way to end a meeting. And that has maybe a bit of a more positive feel depending on how you're looking at it or what comes up. I also tend to, I like to live in the juicy stuff, to be honest, the stuff that maybe is a bit uncomfortable. So I do like, okay, we're finishing up. We've got, maybe 10 minutes left. What hasn't been said that needs to be said in order for us to all feel comfortable? I really do. It's dangerous. I get it, because, if you really do only have 10 minutes left, what if people unearth all of this stuff that they waited to the last 10 minutes? But you know what? You are clearer now. You are one step clearer. You have more data, and you book another darn meeting in order to hash some of that out. So for leaders to not be too fearful to ask maybe those really juicy questions that potentially unearth a bunch of stuff at the very end, because there's other days, there's other times, and now you are clearer than you were before. So those are probably 2 of some of my favorites. Or you could always end with a bit of a wrap up. Okay, here's what we said today. Here's what we decided on, and what else? Oh, well, we didn't talk about, and just allow people to come up with whatever other things that maybe hasn't been said or that they wanted to touch on. And again, now you have more data for the next time around. So.
Okay, so we're heading to my last question of the podcast,
right.
And that is, who is or was the best coach-like leader that you worked for or with? I'm not assuming anything. Who is or was the best coach-like leader that you worked for?
Michael.
I just realized, why would I ask? You know what? I'm not assuming anything.
No, so you know what? I know this question was coming because I watched your podcast, and I could tell, or I saw that this was one you asked of everybody, and I thought it was interesting to watch how people navigated it. Right? Do they name one person, or do they say, oh, everybody's been amazing, and how do you navigate, even just how do you stay curious about the nature of this question? So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to do both. I'm going to balance on both. I'm going to say, and I have, anybody who might be watching this from my past, I've had leaders all throughout my shorts, in terms of how many jobs I've had career, who care, who are empathetic, who understand, kind of the nature of that I am not one person at work and one person at home, and really respect. I really have. I've had all leaders who really have that kind of authentic and empowering and respectful leadership. And if the question is, who has been the most powerful in terms of my day-to-day and demonstrating this stuff, it's actually my colleague, Chloe Norman. She's an individual contributor on my team, and she is a leader from where she sits, because I have never met anybody, and other than Michael, who I've never reported to and worked with, in day-to-day life, I've never met anybody who leverages questions and slowing down and curiosity and getting clear and making sure we know what we're talking about before we rush to. I've never met anybody who does it as effectively and naturally and comfortably as Chloe. And that's good news, because she's who builds our learning programs. And you don't want somebody who doesn't believe and kind of have a facility with these skills herself, kind of helping to build some of the programs that our clients participate in. So I'm grateful for her. She's constantly making me think and constantly forcing us to get clearer. She practices what we preach with our clients. It's amazing.
I could see through this interview how clear you are with your answers, and how you're digging in, and how you're bouncing back at me with the questions, which I love, and it's rare as well. So thank you for putting me into a position where I have to just focus as well, not just asking questions, but answering them. I like it. I love it. I love being stretched, and especially if you're working out for yourself, like me, it's hardly ever I get to be asked those questions and really pushed hard forward, and I love it. I need it. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Appreciate that. Awesome. So once again, thank you for spending your time with us. I've learned so many things. We are about to wrap up this live stream, guys, and that episode also will be available as a podcast episode in the next few weeks, guys. So keep your eyes open. I'll definitely be shouting out about it a lot moving forward. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for those who asked that asked all those questions. And Chantal, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Raf. It was fun. Thanks everybody for listening.
Okay, now I need to. I really need to. There is a question at the end of each life, your feedback about it, and I need to just keep on repeating it. Can you make this process a little bit better for me? Remove.